In the summer of 2021, Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the United States, dropped to its lowest level since it was first filled in the 1930s. 90% of the American West was in drought. Farmers in California were paid to not grow crops because there wasn't enough water to grow them anyway. And in Texas, the Rio Grande ran so low that you could walk across it in some places. The response was the same one we always get. Politicians blamed each other, experts called for conservation, and nothing fundamentally changed. But while all of that was happening, while the United States was watching its water disappear, something else was going on the other side of the planet. A country that faces an even more severe water crisis than America was doing something about it. Not with policy, not with conservation campaigns, with science. Specifically with an army. An army of 35,000 people whose job is to control the weather. China has 35,000 people secretly engineering the weather. Here's what they're building. Here's what I want you to think about for a second. We live in a world where artificial intelligence is writing code, generating images, and diagnosing cancer. Where private companies are landing rockets on drone ships. Where a lab in California made a nuclear fusion reaction produce more energy than it consumed. We talk about all of those things constantly, but almost nobody is talking about the fact that human beings already have the ability to make it rain, and have had it for nearly 80 years. The technology is called cloud seeding. And while you've probably heard the term, you almost certainly don't know the true scale at which it's being deployed right now. So here's the question I want to answer in this video. If weather modification technology has existed since the 1940s, why did it take 80 years to go from a laboratory curiosity to a program employing 35,000 people? And what finally changed? The answer involves artificial intelligence. And it's more important than almost anything else happening in the world right now. To understand why AI changed everything, you first need to understand why cloud seeding didn't work for most of its history. The basic science of cloud seeding is elegant. You take a substance, usually silver iodide, and you disperse it into a cloud. The particles act as nuclei. Water vapor in the cloud latches onto them, forms droplets, and eventually falls as rain or snow. Simple, right? The problem was never the seeding itself. The problem was knowing where to seed. Imagine trying to hit a moving target, a specific cloud formation, at exactly the right moment of its development, in exactly the right atmospheric conditions, using instruments that could only give you data from a handful of ground stations and a few weather balloons. That's what meteorologists were working with from the 1950s through the 2000s. They could seed clouds. They just couldn't prove they were causing rain. And if you can't prove it works, you can't fund it at scale. This is where artificial intelligence enters the picture. Starting around 2018 and accelerating dramatically through 2022 and 2023, AI systems became capable of ingesting and synthesizing a type and volume of atmospheric data that was previously impossible to process in real time. We're talking about NASA satellite data updated every 10 minutes, radar networks covering millions of square kilometers, drone-mounted sensors flying directly inside cloud formations, historical precipitation records going back a century. Separately, none of this data was useful fast enough to matter. Together, processed by AI in real time, it tells you exactly which cloud, exactly where, exactly when, and exactly how much silver iodide to disperse to maximize precipitation. China understood this before anyone else. By 2020, the Chinese government had integrated AI-powered atmospheric modeling into its national weather modification program, and then did something no other country had done before. They scaled it. The target: artificially enhance rainfall and snowfall across an area of 5.5 million square kilometers. To put that in perspective, that's larger than the entire landmass of India. And to run an operation that size, you need people. 35,000 of them. That's not a research program. That's not a pilot project. That's an industry. Now here's where it gets genuinely complicated. Because when one country starts engineering the weather at this scale, it doesn't just affect that country. Weather doesn't respect borders. Let's walk through the chain of effects. Effect 1. Water supply. The Tibetan Plateau is sometimes called the third pole because it holds more fresh water in its glaciers than anywhere on Earth, outside of the Arctic and Antarctic. 10 of Asia's largest rivers originate there, supplying fresh water to nearly 2 billion people downstream. China's weather modification program is heavily focused on this region. The official goal is to increase annual precipitation and protect snowpack. But when you pull more moisture out of clouds passing over Tibet, that's moisture that would have continued downwind, potentially into India, into Pakistan, into Bangladesh. In 2018, an Iranian government official made an extraordinary public statement. He claimed that Israel was using cloud seeding to intercept Mediterranean moisture before it could reach Iranian territory. Scientists initially dismissed it, but when atmospheric researchers actually looked at the data, the wind patterns, Israel's documented seeding operations, Iran's precipitation records, the picture became considerably more complicated than a simple denial. Weather modification, it turns out, may be the world's first form of covert resource warfare, and China is operating it at a scale that makes Israel's program look like a hobby. Effect 2. Agriculture. China's northern regions face a structural water deficit. The Yellow River, which supplies water to hundreds of millions of people, has run dry at its mouth multiple times in the last 3 decades. The weather modification program is, in part, an attempt to compensate, to move precipitation from areas that receive too much to areas that receive too little. In 2021, China announced it would expand the program to cover 60% of the country's total land area by 2025. For context, most countries don't have a cloud seeding program at all. Effect 3. The military dimension. This is the part that defense analysts and intelligence agencies are watching most carefully. Weather modification technology is inherently dual use. The same AI system that tells you where to seed clouds for agriculture can tell you where to seed them to deny precipitation to an adversary. The same drone that disperses silver iodide for rain enhancement can be used for atmospheric disruption over an enemy's territory. The United States, Russia, and China all investigated weather warfare during the Cold War. The U.S. actually used cloud seeding operationally during the Vietnam War, Operation Popeye, to extend the monsoon season and disrupt North Vietnamese supply lines. It was classified for years. Most people still don't know it happened. The 1978 Environmental Modification Convention, ENMOD, was supposed to prohibit hostile weather modification, but its definitions of what counts as hostile and what counts as significant leave enormous gray areas. Gray areas that 35,000 Chinese weather engineers are operating inside of right now. Effect 4. The global arms race. China's program didn't happen in isolation. It triggered a response. The UAE launched one of the most technologically advanced cloud seeding programs per capita in the world. 300 flights per year, AI-guided drones, nano-engineered seeding flares. Saudi Arabia inaugurated a national program in 2022 targeting 3 major cities. India has been running cloud seeding operations over drought-affected states. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation formalized cloud seeding as a key climate adaptation tool in March 2025. The race to control precipitation is accelerating, and almost none of it is being covered by mainstream media. So here's where I want to leave you, and it's not where you might expect. The standard narrative around weather modification goes one of 2 ways. Either it's dismissed as marginal science that barely works, or it's inflated into a conspiracy theory about governments poisoning populations. Both of those framings miss what's actually happening. What's actually happening is this. Artificial intelligence just solved the attribution problem that kept cloud seeding from scaling for 80 years. China understood that first and built an industrial-scale program before anyone else had even updated their strategy documents. Now every major water-stressed nation is racing to catch up. The surprising conclusion is not that weather modification is dangerous, although it carries real risks that deserve serious governance frameworks. The surprising conclusion is that it might be necessary. The United Nations projects that 2/3 of the global population will face water stress by 2030. The Colorado River Compact, the legal framework that governs water rights for 40 million Americans, was designed for a river that no longer exists at the volume it was measured at in the 1920s. Traditional water infrastructure, dams, reservoirs, aquifers, took a century to build and is now failing faster than it can be replaced. Cloud seeding, enhanced by AI and scaled by the kind of political will that only exists in countries facing genuine existential water crises, may be the fastest lever available. Not a solution, a lever. The country that figures out how to govern it transparently, that develops international frameworks for cloud seeding operations the way we developed frameworks for nuclear technology, will have an enormous geopolitical advantage in the driest century in recorded human history. China already has 35,000 people working on this. The question is, who's going to be second? If you found this useful, subscribe. Next week, we're covering the country that accused its neighbor of stealing its rain, and why the science is more complicated than anyone wants to admit.